After over 4 years of digging itself into an incredibly deep hole, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to attempt a comeback with Doomsday allegedly set to still come out a year from now. But I want to go back in the rewind machine and take a look at how we got here. Here we were 6 years ago now, December of 2019, and studio president Kevin Feige talking about how the future phases of Marvel, specifically phases 4 and 5, were going to be some of the most diverse and representative that we've ever seen, beginning with Shang-Chi. And of course, that came out in 2021 after theaters reopened following over a 1-year lockdown from COVID. And even after some struggles in the box office, Kevin Feige kept walking us down the road of DEI, that this was going to be the future of Marvel in phases 4 and 5. Even during the red carpet prior to Shang-Chi's release itself, about a year before this article came out, he talked about how diverse and representative that it was going to be all throughout Marvel phases 4 and 5. But then followed a few years of one box office failure after another, using some of the most expensive productions in Hollywood history and turning them into mid-level films. And don't forget the spate of television shows on Disney+.
WandaVision, Loki, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, She-Hulk, Hawkeye, Ironheart, Secret Invasion, Miss Marvel, Moon Knight.
But yet here we are in 2025. Kevin Feige reaffirms Marvel's commitment to diversity despite recent box office challenges. And now, according to a confirmed previous rumor from scooper Daniel Richtman, we now know exactly how Kevin Feige plans to do this, bringing back all the white people. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see all of you out there once again. And if you are like one of the many watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker around on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday and Wednesday afternoon right here on Valiant Renegade for the live shows at 6 p.m. Eastern. I talked about this rumor probably a month or so ago now, maybe a little bit longer. There had been rumors circulating that Avengers Doomsday was effectively going to pick right up where Endgame ended back in 2019. In other words, it was almost completely unnecessary for you to have watched anything in phases 4 and 5 film or television, by and large, to even know what's going on here, because they're desperately trying to get the audience back in. And this rumor that it was going to center around Steve Rogers' disappearance at the end of Endgame to put the Infinity Stones back in the timeline where they belonged, a lot of it was going to revolve around those series of events. And here we go. This is from geeksandgamers.com. Rumor: Steve Rogers set to lead Avengers Doomsday as Marvel quietly corrects the post-Endgame failure. Marvel Studios may be finally acknowledging what audiences have been telling them for years. The post-Avengers Endgame era hasn't worked. According to a new report from longtime industry insider Daniel Richtman, Steve Rogers is not only returning to the MCU, but will once again be positioned as the central figure, this time in Avengers Doomsday. Now, I want you to stop and think about this admission of failure for a moment. You just spent the last 4 years, 5 years, by the time Avengers Doomsday comes out in late 2026 in the Christmas frame, if, again, it still actually comes out in that frame. I've told you guys before, I have a healthy degree of skepticism that this movie is going to land that mark. I think it's going to get moved again because I don't see how it's going to share space and have no access to IMAX screens when it goes toe-to-toe with something like Dune Messiah, which is an IMAX brand ambassador, but that's another discussion. When we look at this film, you're admitting now, Marvel, that all of this, whether it was diverse or not diverse in the last 4 years, that it frankly didn't work. You haven't built up a single character or team of characters in the last 4 to 5 years. Maybe at least a dozen or a dozen and a half different films, and maybe twice as much content or 3 times as much content that was farted out on Disney Plus that frankly didn't even bring in half the audience of the average documentary on Netflix, like Poop Cruise, for example, yet nobody's watched it. So how can you lean on it? You go back to the old dudes that brought you to the dance, the guys like the Steve Rogers, Chris Evans, and of course the Robert Downey Jr.'s. This is about as close to an admission of failure or a mea culpa that you're ever going to get from the Walt Disney Company. And I've said this for the 5 years I've been on YouTube. They don't apologize for mistakes.
Do you have a bit of experience in that arena?
If you consider failure experience.
They simply change things in the dead of night quietly and hope nobody really picks up on it. The revelation is significant, says the article, not just for what it means narratively, but for what it signals about Marvel's broader creative course correction after years of declining box office returns, fractured audience interest, and repeated failures to establish new legacy replacements. Now, to Marvin's credit here, yeah, he's got it right, but I think he's going a little bit easy on the fractured audience portion. This is not a fractured audience. This is a wrecked audience. This is an audience that has been put through 6 inches of steel wall by way of freight train. We talked about the box office for these Marvel movies since phases 4 and 5 began. One thing that is unassailably true is that once you factor in inflationary adjustments for ticket prices, and you also adjust for the fact that there are far more premium large format and IMAX screens now, today in 2025, than there were, say, 13 years ago when the first Avengers film came out, meaning much higher ticket averages, you started realizing that not only were the box office average grosses sharply lower than they were in Phase 3, but once you factored in that inflationary pressure, you realized that at least half, if not in some cases 60% of the audience has checked out of the door. It's not just about the raw dollars coming into these movies. It's about the butts in seats. It's about the complete loss, or nearly complete loss by comparison, of all of its formerly evergreen merchandising prowess. Those toy aisles at Walmart and Target and go on down the line are not nearly as full as they used to be. Back 10 years ago, when Marvel enjoyed at least 1 or 2 aisles all to itself in these kinds of stores, now barely occupy maybe a quarter of one single aisle, if not an eighth. Steve Rogers' return is no longer subtle. In a post shared on X, Daniel Rickman stated that Marvel is no longer hiding its plans for Steve Rogers, confirming both his return and his prominence in the upcoming crossover event. And this is Daniel's actual post. Okay, so since Marvel is revealing it themselves, I can also tell you that the first teaser is Steve Rogers focused, and his return is confirmed. The reason is to establish him as the lead character in Avengers Doomsday. And I want to be clear, he continues, I'm not trying to be negative here. I've heard good things about the movie. It's just that personally, I'm not a fan of this decision. Bringing Steve back, fine. Making him the focus alongside RDJ's Doom, that's kind of, All right, so let's take the 2 parts of Rickman's post individually. First off, you have the actual news of them reestablishing Steve Rogers as the focused lead in the film. And funny enough, we kind of hit this a few days ago when news broke that there would be 4, count them, 4 different teasers for Doomsday. Disney is allegedly set to release 1 each week during the run that begins this Friday for Avatar Fire and Ash, or Avatar 3. So out of all 4 of these alleged trailers, Disney and Marvel have chosen deliberately to select which one? They're leading off by telling audiences the white guys are back. The original crew is back. After 5 years of Kevin Feige telling us of how diverse and representative this was going to be, it came down to the money. And they had to go back to the well to get the audiences back in. Now, I want to be clear. I don't really care how diverse and representative Disney and Marvel or anybody else wants to make their content. The problem was, at the same time, the quality of the content went down the toilet. Audiences checked out. Using characters, the D and E and F list characters that most people had never heard of, number 1, and number 2, making cheap virtue signaling race and gender swaps of the legacy characters, like giving us Sam Wilson as the new Captain America, clearly did not work, which is why we constantly refer to the last movie as Captain Falcon DEI. We all knew what that was about. Matter of fact, they're trying to get rid of that in the parks too. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole article, but you can see here for yourself, even in Disney parks, at least the ones where they have access to utilize Marvel characters that are either west of the Mississippi River or not in the continental United States, in this case, Disneyland Paris. Yeah, the new show that they're having out there is featuring traditional Steve Rogers Captain America, not Sam Wilson Captain DEI. You can see that here over and over again. And it sure is a sign that Disney is probably getting back to form on the things, not about being white or black, but frankly, what makes them actual money. But then there's the second part of Daniel's post, which is certainly more editorialized and more of his personal feelings. Let's go back to that one. Again, he says, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to be negative. I've heard good things about the movie. It's just that personally, I'm not a fan of this decision. Bringing Steve back, fine. Making him the focus alongside RDJ's Doom, that's kind of, I would frankly love to know what Rickman's preference would be in this case. What else could Marvel have done? What would otherwise be the focal character of this film? Something new, something from phases 4 and 5? Quite frankly, none of that has worked for 5 years. Zero of it has worked for 5 years. Are you going to make Deadpool and Wolverine the focal points of this movie? I don't think that would play out, maybe necessarily with entire general audiences, nor do I think the characters or the actors would necessarily want to be, although I'm sure they'll be in the film. But what's left? Shang-Chi, Girl Hawkeye, Black Captain America that didn't work out well at all at the box office. How about the Fantastic Four, which did $100 million less than a relatively kind of ho-hum box office for a brand new Superman movie? I mean, look, compared to the rest of the stuff in the box office this year, domestically especially, Superman did pretty darn well. But it wasn't exactly anything to write home about, as we covered months ago when it came out. So then where do you go? You know, the magic of Pedro Pascal never was any magic. And look, the crazy thing is, Pedro's transgender brother is probably going to be watched by more people on his movie on Netflix than the people who watched Pedro in Fantastic Four. Just throwing it out there. So honestly, Daniel, with all due respect, what would your preference have been? What would you have rather seen here? Marvel and Kevin Feige and Disney have thrown everything against the wall up to and including the kitchen sink, and none of it has worked. And quite frankly, right now, Marvel and Feige and Disney ought to be really, really terrified of what this movie is going to do. Because I think even bringing back this entire legacy cast that built the first 3 phases, and maybe the only phases of Marvel that will ever be remembered long term, is the only thing they had left to do. This is the only thing that might work, and the problem is that it might not even work that well. I am still incredibly unconvinced that Doomsday could even reach the heights of Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, it might get close and it might surpass it even a little bit. We still have a long way to go before this movie comes out, and there's a lot of things that could shift the winds one way or the other. But quite frankly, there's nothing leading into this film that is getting fans excited. It's going to be nearly 18 months from the time that Fantastic Four came out to the time Doomsday finally releases, if it hits its Christmas mark in 26. Now, let's go back to those teaser trailers, and let's see what else, what other characters or what other focuses they're going to be after we get, allegedly, the Captain America Steve Rogers-based teaser trailer first out of these 4. What are the other 3? Okay, Steve Rogers is said to be the first release, despite earlier indications that Dr. Doom would lead the campaign. If accurate, the change in order suggests Marvel intentionally chose to open with its safest and most recognizable figure rather than its new villain. Subsequent teasers are rumored to focus on Thor, okay, and Dr. Doom, okay, reinforcing the idea that Doomsday is being sold almost entirely on pre-Endgame characters rather than the new legacy replacements introduced over the last several phases. If not a single one of these teasers truly focuses in on one of the new characters, and no, Deadpool and Wolverine does not count, absolutely does not count. We're talking about the new Marvel characters they brought in post-Endgame. We're talking about, again, the Shang-Chis. How about the Eternals? Girl Thor was another one, right? We had that in Thor Love and Thunder. Again, we can go on down the list with all the race and gender swaps. Do you think there's going to be a teaser trailer that focuses in on Echo?
You serious?
No, it means that Disney is effectively trying to make the audience forget the pain and suffering they went through of the last 5 years that they soundly rejected not only in the theaters, but also in the merchandise aisles at places like Target and Walmart. The move to reinstall Rogers at the center of the MCU would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Endgame was explicitly framed as passing of the torch, with Steve Rogers stepping aside and handing Captain America's mantle and the shield over to Sam Wilson. The plan, however, flopped. Absolutely flopped. But I'm sure that we'll get a teaser trailer featuring Brie Larson's Captain Marvel.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
The bottom line is Disney and Marvel had no place left to go. So they have to go back to what came before and admit the failure that they have been engaged in the last 5 years. And that is a failure that has come with an enormous price tag of quite literally billions and billions and billions of dollars. If we added up all of the production costs in the last 5 years, not only for the film slate that has hit theaters, but also for the incredibly expensive television shows that have been farted out on Disney Plus, we probably are actually going to hit somewhere near $5 billion, especially if we throw in all of the marketing. Then, if you compound that with the fact of the merchandise sales that have basically been non-existent, the full economic opportunity costs of going the direction that they chose to with phases 4 and 5, quite frankly, we might be talking about a $10 billion mistake by the Walt Disney Company in the last 5 years, just when it comes to Marvel alone. Is Doomsday going to save their bacon? I have my doubts, but we'll find out in about a year if they don't move it again. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.